What's up, YouTube? I'm back here with another deck profile player interview with a good friend of mine, Jakxshadows, aka Justin Crum, and he recently just did an awesome tournament placing at the Disney Lorcana Challenge in Seattle, Washington. I'm gonna let him go ahead and introduce himself real quick.
Yeah, my name is Justin. I go by Jakxshadows online, and I've been playing Lorcana since the start of it. Uh, I've played a little bit of other card games here and there. I played Hearthstone when I was back in like undergrad and grad school a bit. I've played some Magic the Gathering, but nothing else ever like super seriously. So Lorcana is really the first one that we're actually trying to compete at, for example.
Yeah, and so far you've done an amazing job. You've actually topped two events. You've also topped the DLC in Toronto, if I'm not mistaken. And
Yes.
with both events, you use Sapphire Steel, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I've actually had so I've done 4 DLCs with Sapphire Steel and one with Green Steel. I did Green Steel in Atlanta when I got worried that my deck was going to be really bad into a bunch of red blue. Turns out that was a bad meta call. Should have just taken the Sapphire Steel there.
Yeah, you're right about
But
that.
yep. But yeah, and then in for the other 4 DLCs that I've gone to, everything but Chicago in North America, I've hit either top 128 or top 64, all using Sapphire Steel.
Yeah, so those are really impressive results, and I just want to say congratulations again to you for getting top 64 at the event. And as always, it was super awesome seeing you in person, getting to chat up with you. We actually met at the first DLC that I went to here in Texas at the Fort Worth event. And, even before that, we had been talking online through the 20 Lore Pro Discord and talking about Sapphire Steel and how much, we love the deck. And ever since I met you, like I already knew that you were really skilled with the deck, the way you would talk about the deck, and it's no surprise that you were able to get this awesome placing. Unfortunately, you didn't get there at the end, but I know at the next event that you'll go to, you're gonna kill it like always. Going back to Seattle, why did you choose to use Sapphire Steel again for this event? It's just that's your main deck that you're gonna run with.
Yeah, so I've had this conversation actually with a few people, and I think this is an interesting conversation point. With the 2 game format being what it is, I think it's very punishing to take decks that you don't know very well. And there's I know other high level players actually disagree with me on this, and they'll say, you should try and play all the different decks and learn the different stuff. And I think that's true. But when it comes to taking a deck to a DLC, if you're not, if you're not Zan, if you're not Zach Bivens, if you're not that caliber of a player, which I don't consider myself at that level, you really have to know your deck inside and out. You can't afford to make mistakes. And what I found is that across 9 rounds of highly competitive Lorcana, you're going to make mistakes if you don't know your deck perfectly.
Yeah, I
So
totally
sticking
agree
with
with
one
that.
deck. Yeah. So I've stuck with the one deck for the other 4 DLCs that I went to. It's what I've been playing since the start. I know there's old Pixelborn grinders that will look at my name and say, "Yep, I played against him on Sapphire Steel all the way back." So like, if people see my name in Discord or see my name on Melee or anything like that, and they were playing all the way back then, they'll know that I've been on that deck for a
They'll
while.
know, and they'll know that you're gonna be very good with the deck, and it's not gonna be your average blue steel player. So that's that's something awesome you have with your name. And
Mhm.
with how you ended up with the tournament, I'm assuming you obviously made a good choice. Like how you just said, it's a deck that you've been using, and to go to these tournaments, you have to use a deck that you know the ins and outs. And I
Mhm.
really like how you said you're gonna make mistakes either way, because if you try to play perfect, that you're just mess up even more. And me personally, with Sapphire Steel, I think the deck was a awesome meta call. And what's really interesting about the deck is the deck list. Other players, who use Sapphire Steel also topped, and like all the lists are different. What are your thoughts on that, and how diverse the color combination was represented in the tournament?
Yeah. So there was the 2 main flavors, right? There are the whole new world deck lists and there are the non-whole new world deck
Mm-hmm.
lists. And for the whole new world version, my deck had a few non-standard cards in it. Um, But the overall idea behind what Sapphire Steel can do right now is just is very powerful, right? It can control the board in the early game, which is helpful into these green steel decks. It struggles a little bit with controlling the board when you see like a 1/4 cross the board from you.
Early game,
But
yeah.
for the most, yeah, yep. But for the most part, there weren't that many like Daisy Ducks anticipated in Seattle. And so when board control is about killing off Diablos, or killing off Curse Merfolks in green purple, or killing off Flynn Riders, or things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sapphire Steel excels there. And then as far as like the whole new world versus whole new world lists go, I've tried the no whole new world lists. I think it's very strong. I think
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as good at it.
Yeah, it
uh,
takes more practice for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a very different play
Mm-hmm.
style. And I don't fault anyone for saying that they like it better. I don't fault anyone for saying that they don't get it. I took it to the Friday competitive constructed and played it, and I went 0-1-4.
All right, not too bad, not too bad.
Yeah, yeah, but not great, right? And
Not
so
great,
like I
yeah.
looked at it and I was like, I don't understand how to win with this version of the deck when I'm on the
Mm-hmm.
draw. And so for me, that was sort of the turning point of like, okay, it's clear to me. I know how to win on the draw with the whole new world version. I am struggling to do so without whole new world and without the other cards that I would normally have in my list for that.
Mm-hmm. To close
And so
out the
that's how I
game.
ended up.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Back to the deck list, you again decided to run with New World. And right here, I'm going
Mhm.
to have it up for the viewers to see. And, we're just going to talk about it real quick. The first thing that people are going to notice compared to other lists is the Tipo versus Mickey. What decided for you to go with Tipo, and why 3 compared to 4?
Yeah, so let's start on Tipo. So if you go back and you listen to interviews from Ed
Mm-hmm.
back after he won Dallas Fort Worth,
The red
uh,
purple player. Mm-hmm.
yep, you'll hear some quotes from him where he talks about why he went down to 12 uninkables in red purple. And before that, a lot of red purple lists were sort of closer to like 14 or 16, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he had cut out some stuff and said, I'm going to run 4 B preps, 4 rabbits. I think he did 3 Medusas and 1 big Sisu, and those were his 12 uninkables. I've been looking to cut Mickey from Blue Steel since
Since
set
the
1.
start. Yeah, since the start.
Yep.
Such a good
You
bad
can
card.
Yeah, if you can go back through conversation history between like me and R&B, for
Mm-hmm.
example, and you'll see me trying to convince him to play Winnie the Pooh back in set 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
And sooner or later I had to give up Winnie the Pooh. Once Brawl got printed, I was like, yeah, okay, Winnie the Pooh is dead. Got it, understood.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so Mickey is a card that is very good for the first copy that you have in your hand that you open with.
After that, it's dead.
And then yeah, after that, he's just an uninkable card that causes a lot of issues with clogging up your hand and slowing down the momentum that you have at the start of the game. And Blue Steel is a very strong deck, but it really needs that early game momentum. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. It can't really afford to stumble and play a 1/3 on 3 2 turns in a row.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to reduce the number of unequal cards in my deck, and I wanted to get away from having Mickey, with the idea being that like in the past I'd had games where I'd have Fishbone Quill and Mickey in my hand, but I draw an uninkable and I have to ink the Fishbone Quill instead of playing it and then
Mm-hmm.
play the Mickey instead.
And that's
And that
just
always,
horrible.
oh yeah, it feels so bad to do something like that into anything that's not a discard matchup. Um, And so for me, when I saw Tipo, I know a lot of Sapphire Steel players tried out Tipo at the start of the set
Mm-hmm.
and sort of slowly went back to Mickey by the end of the set. And they
Mm-hmm.
sort of had this idea in mind that after Vegas, of like, okay, uh,
Green steel.
Green Steel is back. We can't afford to play Tipo and dump an extra card from our hand to get our ramp. And so they went that route. And I don't fault that mentality at all. I will say one of the oftentimes winning plays against green steel, as a lot of red blue players have noticed, is if you can go Popsicle on 1, Tipo on 2,
Hiram.
Flabbersham on 3,
Yep.
is a very strong counterplay to them.
Yeah, that Hiram's not going anywhere.
Exactly. And so, like, do I think Mickey is actually just 100% of the time better into the green steel matchup? No, not really. I think that opener with Tipo is
Mm-hmm.
very, very powerful there.
Yeah, I agree.
But
Mm-hmm.
I also ended up teching the deck a little bit more for green steel, so we'll get into that in a little bit. So the other
Yeah, I can
question
see
you had,
that. Why did you decide to go with Argus over the Magic Brooms and the copy at 2 copies? Correct? Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I'm gonna lump in a couple other cards with this as well because I
Mm-hmm.
think the conversation of why Argus versus Magic Broom also needs to include the number of copies of Fire the Cannons and the number of copies of Smashes that I play. And so I played 2 Smash, 2 Fire the Cannons, and 2 Argus. And I did try out Magic Broom for about a week before the DLC. Everyone was like, Justin, try out the Magic Broom. It's going to make your Green Steel matchup a lot better. I was like, okay, let me give it a shot. I've never liked Magic Broom before, but I'll give
Ma-
it a shot,
it
see if I like it now.
checks Flynn as well, so that's pretty good as well.
Right. So it'll check Flynn for a turn, and it forces Diablo into some weird situations. The issue I ran into was with how teched my deck is against Green Steel. And even beyond just the removal, we'll get into some of the other cards I've got there as well. But for how teched it is in the green steel, I really didn't need more Diablo checks.
Makes
And
sense.
the times where I did Magic Broom on 2, it felt like if they had the absolute god draw, Magic Broom did nothing for me. Like if they had
Yeah, that makes sense.
Diablo,
Yeah.
Shift Diablo, move to Hidden
Cove.
Cove, Broom doesn't do it, right? Broom's not good enough in that scenario. There was another one that happened that I was just like, why am I playing this card? Where they did like Diablo on 1, turn 2 they play Ursula, turn 3 they played 3-drop Ursula, shifted Diablo, saying Strength of a Raging Fire onto my Broom. And I'm just
So
like,
yeah,
okay.
the god
So
hand.
exactly. So it's like if I want to answer green steel, to me the way to do that didn't feel like delaying their Diablo from exerting.
It was
It
more
felt like
to permanently answer the card.
exactly, yeah. So I would rather have the smash and the fire the cannons there to deal with the card rather than like a temporary character.
And the ratios that you have right here, I'm looking at it, is 2 cannons with 2 smash.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel like four Diablo killers, and obviously the smash and the fire the cannons could be used to wipe out other targets that are really popular in the meta, like shift targets for example. Did you feel like 4 was enough? If you could go back, would you add like a fifth removal for that, or you think 4 is just solid?
I think 4 is enough. A fifth removal there would have been helpful in one game, but at some point in time, when you're creating a Sapphire Steel list, you look at the total number of deck slots that you have and you say, okay, I need this particular deck slot to
Mm-hmm.
impact 80% of my matches, we'll say, right? And once you pass that like 4 low cost removal, it really becomes like how many matches is this fifth low cost removal actually going to impact? Um, and at that point, it's like, okay, maybe the fifth isn't actually worth it just from like maybe it impacts my one bad Diablo game, but then what if it loses me 3 other games because I draw too many removal and not enough like
Yeah.
actual threats myself,
So
sort of thing.
at that point, you chose to, instead of having that fifth, removal Diablo killer, you chose to go with 2 Argus to help you percentage wise into like your red purple matchup.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, I like the ratio. I
And
like the
then
2-2-2. It's really like really clean.
yeah. The Argus is, and I guess actually this gets back to our previous discussion about Whole New World versus No Whole New World. I won't play a deck at a DLC that has a bad red purple matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so Argus for Sapphire Steel is one way
To
of
deal with that matchup.
shoring up the red-purple matchup,
Jakxshadows,
exactly.
Argus and Smee can knock out a castle. Really strong combination.
Yep.
In your Diablo killer package, why did you choose not to run babooms and Zeus? Zeus.
So Baboom is interesting. If I needed more inkable slots, which you can always have more inkable slots, like it's never a bad thing, right? But the power of Fire the Cannons is enough to justify at least a couple copies of it. So the fact that it only costs one, right? We can sneak it in on one on the draw if we need to. We can sneak it in after a Fishbone Quill if we need to.
Draw
We can
into
do
it.
something. Yep, there's always there's lots of ways that you can just sort of add in one ink. Sometimes, one winning line. So my list, I think I played 4 Pete's if I remember, or maybe I ended up swapping that right at the end, but I think I played
I say
4.
4 Peats, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the play lines that I would often do is maybe if I don't have Flaversham, but if I have, for example, Tipo into Pete plus Fire the Cannons, that's another good line that I could look at, right? And
Oh yeah, it's a
so
really good line.
the 2 ink cost on Baboom, I've played a lot of Babooms in the past, and it's fine when I am sort of starved for inkables.
Yeah, it was more popular last set.
Exactly. As far as the Smash versus Baboom goes, Smash is a card that fell out of popularity a lot, I would say,
Yes.
for Sapphire Steel. But I wasn't going to play Zeus because the prominence of Ursula makes that a little bit difficult. We don't have a lot of great 4-cost singers in the deck besides Flaversham.
Or Tala, but
And
we don't really play Tala.
exactly. And so Zeus is kind of this weird song for Sapphire Steel. We don't have a lot of great opportunities that we want to play it. And it's uninkable, and so it causes issues there. Whereas Smash gets rid of Ursula 3.
It
It
can't
gets
get
rid of
sniped.
Ariel. Yep. It doesn't get hit by the Ursula 2. It can kill a Naveen, it can kill an Ariel, it kills the Ursula 3, it
And
kills
also anything in the Merlin
Radlets,
package, yeah.
whatever. So Smash, I think, is an underrated card. It never feels good to smash something early game. I'm not
Yeah.
keeping Smash in my opener most of the time, unless I already know I'm against Green Steel. If I know I'm against Green Steel,
I'm
I'll
keeping
keep
that for
Smash.
sure.
But that's the only deck that I'm actually keeping it into. But for example, I ran into green purple at one point throughout the day. I think in my round where I got my last win to get into the top cut, and I smashed a couple things that he wasn't expecting me to have smash for, and it's just a lot of people don't expect Sapphire Steel to have quite as much single target removal as my particular list had.
Yeah, it's such a toolbox deck. You could have so many different options of removal. It's insane.
Yeah, exactly.
I was actually talking to the Rat, who, for those who don't know, is the winner of the DLC in Chicago. And I tested with him for a bit, and we were trying out Smash, and he was pretty much saying red players will run 4 brawls, and no one calls them crazy, but Sapphire Steel players can't run 4 smashes. And when you think about it, it makes sense. How come there's no world where we're playing 4 smashes? Is it just because the targets that it's good for is just not needed to run 4 smash?
Yeah, so that's a great point, and I've talked with other people about this as well. I think Brawl is a little bit more justifiable to have as a 4 of, in part because it also kills Flaversham.
Yes.
Because Smash doesn't get rid of that, there's less overall just percent of the meta, right?
It's crazy.
Targets
It's
that are
literally
available to
people
us.
aren't playing the card, you know?
But I do still think 2 copies of Smash is fine. I would have happily put in a 3rd copy if I thought that Green Steel and Amber Steel were going to be more prevalent than they were. But some buddies and I did some meta predictions, and with the numbers that we were looking at, I was like, okay, a third Smash isn't really gonna impact enough games to justify it.
Yeah. No, I mean, when I saw you, I'm sorry, when I saw the list and I saw the Smash in it, I was like, okay, yeah, that's a good, like, meta call tech choice right there. And I'm glad that it paid off for you. And another
Yeah.
thing that I see as a tech choice, probably the biggest tech choice of your list, because you see the 4P, which is pretty standard, the 4 Hiram, the Aero
Mhm.
Chempo package, the Chempo, big beefy guy, and can protect your board, and the Tinkerbell, pretty simple. But right now, when you get to the spiciest part of the list, is the 2 Arthurs. Um, what's up with the Arthur? Because me personally, I love this card, but a lot of people just don't like it, and I would love to hear your reasoning why you ran it and what made it in testing stand out for you.
Yeah. So, Bad Vegas, one of the Sapphire Steel players
Shout out
that
to
won
homie
a
Bad Vegas.
Mickey.
Yep.
Yeah. So he got his Mickey back in Dallas, right? Him and I were chatting, and
Yes.
he was like, "Hey, just try one copy of this card." And I was like, "Okay." And this was a week, 2 weeks before the DLC
Any
in
matchup
Seattle.
specifically to try out the card, or just
He
try it
didn't
out?
say anything
He's
specifically.
like,
He's
just
just
try it
like,
out.
"I think this card is cracked. You
Hmm.
should play a copy of it." And I'm like, "All right, I will play one copy. I'll see what happens." And so then I took it to a set champ, and that set champ was actually a relatively weak set champ, um, especially for the area. I've learned that out here in the DC area, there's a whole lot of very strong players apparently. Um, but the one that I went to where I took Arthur was relatively weak, and uh, what I found interesting about it was there was a couple of solid green steel players, and then the entire rest of the field there was a whole bunch of aggro.
Hmm.
And as a Sapphire Steel player in set 5, I actually don't think aggro is super favored for us normally.
Hmm.
Um, Daisy is very painful to deal with. Uh, them having, like, if they're on a purple aggro list with gathering knowledge and wisdom, having goats, having all that, having like amethyst chromacon, like they don't run out of cards as easily, they have more reach, like all of these things are not good for Sapphire Steel.
Hmm.
But when I took the Arthur to that tournament, what I noticed was like, all right, one, I was able, like, he acts as a pseudo removal, but not just a pseudo removal. If you've got a Tinkerbell down and you use that Arthur effect on Tinkerbell, and they had 2 characters that they were depending on, like, oh yeah, I didn't quest with this character because I played a second character,
Hmm.
so then next turn I'll get to quest with both of them before Tinkerbell. Well, you play down the Arthur, you use the Tinkerbell to challenge one, and
Kill the
oftentimes
other
you're
one.
able to get rid of the other. And so I saw that against a couple of the aggro matchups, and then I got into the green steel players that were sort of the other top players at this set champ, and it's like, okay, yeah, they played a Muses. What am I going to do about that? Well, they played a Muses. They've got an Exerted Diablo.
Two
Guess what? I've got a
swords.
Tinkerbell on
Yeah.
board.
Yeah.
I got a Tinkerbell on board. I've got this Arthur. I'm swinging into the Muses and killing the Diablo, right? Um, that sort of play came up a whole bunch. The ability to get rid of warded characters
Hmm.
is very strong for us. If you go all the way back to set 1, for example, 4 willpower characters with ward, like Cusco from set 1, have been a bane of our existence for a
Hmm.
very long time. In fact, I lost a match against the Rat during the DLC in Vegas. Not a whole match, a game against him. And part because I was about to come back. I needed one more turn. And he top decks a Muses at 19 lore.
Oh my.
And
So
I
you need to
can't
find two
answer it.
swords. Yeah, you needed to find two
Yep.
swords.
Yep. So like 4 willpower characters for our deck are very complicated,
Hmm.
especially when they have ward. Um, and so Arthur gave another way to deal with things like that. But the
Hmm.
other thing with Arthur is, like, oftentimes in Sapphire Steel he'll stabilize, but you'll start to run out of removal.
Yes, I
And
agree.
Arthur helps finish the game. He's a 3 lore threat. Um, that is,
6 willpower.
a
Super strong.
6 willpower. So like removing him is very challenging for a lot of decks that are not Ruby.
Yeah, because people are gonna
And
say, "Oh, what about Medusa?" But I mean, it's everything gets Medusa. Everything gets Medusa
everything
at this point. Yeah.
exactly.
So
Yeah. Now, I will say yes, he's a 7-cost uninkable card. He dies to Medusa. I get all that. And so I guess now we're sort of at the point where we can talk about my lists a little more broadly.
mhm.
My list is probably, I would say, anti-tech to red blue. So I took out after Vegas. In Vegas I had a second Tamatoa, I had a second Lucky Dime,
Mhm.
I had one or two Beast Hard Headed, a third Let It Go, and like all these cards are good cards in the red blue matchup.
Super teched out. Yeah.
But they're all cards that are fairly not useful
Anything else?
into the rest of the metagame.
Yeah, super good card in Red Blue, but not good into anything else. Yeah.
Yep. And like, Tamatoa has his issues, right? He gets Bruno'd, he gets World Greatest Criminal Minded, all sorts of things, right? He can get hit by
Maleficent
Elsa plus
Dragon.
Maui, he gets hit by Mal Dragon, exactly. And so like with all these different things that people can do to Tamatoa, all these different things like I just felt like, okay, this one, like these cards that make my red blue matchup better aren't doing enough to impact the rest of
Everything
my
else.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, so our prediction, me and my buddies, our prediction was about 80% of the field would not be red blue, like 20% red blue. And that was a pretty close call to what it ended up being. I think it was right around like 21% or something like that. And so when we were all talking about this, I was like, okay, am I really going to dedicate like 7, 8 deck slots specifically to the red blue matchup? And it's like, well, no, I don't think that's useful. What if I instead, I'll keep the aerials, I'll keep the 4 Pete's, I'll drop down to 1 Tamatoa, drop down to 1 Dime. And it worked out for me very well in Swiss. Like having all these other cards, having the Arthurs, having the Smashes, cards that I wouldn't have had room for if I were still super teched for red blue. All these cards were integral to my success in the Swiss portion of the tournament. Getting through green purple, getting through hyper aggro, getting through green steel.
You pretty much had a whole like toolbox arsenal for every color combination into the meta, which again, like how I've said in the past, like Sapphire Steel is just the best toolbox deck. Like you created your version of your perfect toolbox deck, and I mean I love the list. Can we talk about the 1 Dime? What was it just too cloggy for you?
Yeah, the 1 Dime might be incorrect. I don't know. It was a hedge to the fact that I felt like I could beat any other deck except for red blue. I could beat them without Lucky Dime.
So you were going for like Ariel and Pete, I'm assuming.
Ariel and Pete will get you there. Everything else, really, you end up board controlling, right?
Yeah.
Like, or even just like Cogsworth plus Ariel into a lot of the green matchups. If you just set down a Cogsworth and you quest with an Ariel, they can't kill that Ariel without trading in like 3 characters.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like the Lucky Dimes I often found were like, okay, this doesn't advance my game plan against most of the decks in the field. And if I ever draw 2 of them early game,
horrible.
It's terrible. It is like game losing if you draw 2 of them within your first 5 turns post mulligan.
What happened in your round 1 of day 2, your top 64 match? Let us know. Let the people know how it went down.
Yeah. So we get the pairings, right? We get the pairings on Saturday night, pretty late. And I'm out with some buddies at this point in time. And I look at it and I see that it's it's red blue. It's a big bummer for me because as we've talked about, I teched my deck in such a way that I was like, I'm going to beat the other 80% of the field and then try and split with red blue on the play, basically. That was like kind of my game plan going into Seattle. And I don't regret that decision. That said, I got absolutely and just like utterly demolished.
As worse
In
it
my
could go. For
yeah,
that's what you call a bad
and
matchup.
yeah, well, and I didn't draw super well, but like, you know, when you take out a bunch of cards that are good in the matchup, right? I took out the Beast Hard-Headed, which is a very good card in the matchup. I took out the extra Tamatoa. I took out the extra Dime. I took out the extra answer to
Yeah,
Tamatoa.
it was
It
just
was, yeah.
not your favorable matchup, and unfortunately, you just had to face that. Any other deck would have been a way better chance.
Oh,
Sorry
yeah.
that
It
that
was,
happened, but that's the name of the
yeah.
game, right? That's what happens.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, I don't regret building my deck the way I did. I
Hmm.
think the deck performed very well for me. If you look at the blue steel players, for example, in Top Cut, we all sort of struggled in Top Cut.
Hmm.
And I was talking with a buddy about it, and like, if you take the players, the Sapphire Steel players that were on Whole New World, and you take the ones that were on No Whole New World, and you just swap them with their matchups, I think there's a high likelihood
Everyone would have performed better.
all of us get through. Yep.
Yeah.
I think the red purple guys, or the no wheel guys, got red purple matchups, and the whole new world guys got the red blue matchups, and that just messed all four of us up. And then there
Yeah.
was the fifth guy who was on a single whole new world. I don't remember what he played against.
What are your thoughts moving forward? Are you going to be participating in the last chance qualifiers going into set 6? And if you are you going to stick with Sapphire Steel? Is there enough time to learn something new, or are you just going to stick with it?
So my goal is to participate in the LCQ. I've got some internal testing buddies that we're going to try and figure out what we're doing for the LCQ in Continentals. Will I take Sapphire Steel? I don't know. The one tournament that I didn't take it, I didn't do very well. I mean, I was like 304 at the end of round 7 in Atlanta, so it wasn't like terrible, right? But that said, it's definitely enough time to learn another deck. Like set 6 from the spoilers that we're getting is gonna sort of blow the doors off, or blow the doors, you know, wide open, as they say.
It's 2 months.
In terms,
It's 2 months.
yeah,
You got Christmas and Thanksgiving coming
LCQ.
up.
Yep. So we've got plenty of time to try and learn something new in a new meta, where there's going to be relatively few tournament results before then, right? So
Anything catching your eye?
let's see. If I were to stick around with Sapphire Steel, there's a few very solid improvements. Oh yeah, the 2-drop Jim Hawkins shores up a lot of issues that the deck has with like Amber Steel aggressive decks, for example.
We have that new ramp action card that's just insane. Get to draw a card in ink. It's insane, literally insane.
Yeah. That card is also very strong. What else? There's a lot of like other cards that are, you know, may be very good, may not be very good.
Might be a new type of archetype to Sapphire Steel. We're not gonna just rely on New World anymore, or you know, no New World. It could be like item builds, different type of lore gaining builds. Really interesting to see. We're gonna have a lot of testing, a lot of things to do, things to play, try out, because you know, in 2 months are gonna go by pretty fast. With that being said, do you have any closing thoughts that you want to say? Any shout outs? This was an awesome interview with you. I do appreciate you coming onto the channel and again showcasing your deck list, giving your thoughts and all the details onto why you ran certain cards. I appreciate you. Again, congrats on your placing. And yeah, if you have any shout outs or anything you want to say to close out the video.
Yeah, just you know, shout outs to my wife for always supporting me with this, and the Blue Steel community as a whole is just great. Every time we get to interact with any of the Blue Steel players at DLCs or online is always fantastic. And then of course the testing group that I'm a part of is really keeps me on my toes and make sure that I'm ready for these events, and they're not just like a waste of my time and money. So that's always good.
Yeah, no, I mean clearly it's not, because results speak, and you have the track record to prove that if you go to this last chance qualifier, like there is a higher percentage of you making it. 32 different pods, and that's what it is, right? It's practice. The more you practice, the more reps you put in, you'll get there eventually. So I have no doubt that you see success in that, and hopefully you do, and hopefully a lot of the other Sapphire Steel homies, or just a lot of the players in that we know in general, right? It was a competitive season, super awesome to close it out with this DLC. Again, seeing homies, Lamb and Bad Vegas, and all the other friends that we got to meet, and hopefully again we get to see each other at the LCQ, which is going to be in California, right? Disneyland.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that's gonna be awesome. Hopefully we're all on Sapphire Steel still.